And I can sort of identify with what you were talking about. Not sort of, I can identify in terms of what you were talking about when you came to this community. And there was a sea of white faces. And but the funny thing is I was always more comfortable being in a sea of white faces than I was being in a sea of black faces, because I've been raised in entirely white communities. And I remember going across the border and being in culture shock. I was like, they know who I am. You know, I'm sticking out like a sore thumb, when in fact I wasn't. I was fitting in. But just because of my cultural, how I was raised culturally, I mean, I was sort of raised as part of a community of whites, and I just happened to be black. I raised our son was raised here, and as I said, he attended this school, and he's biracial. His dad's white, and I'm black, obviously. And I think the proudest moment of my life was when he was sitting in a class in the school, and a teacher or an area counselor was doing a life skills class, and they were doing a class that focused on social development and interpersonal skills development. And this particular class was about anger management, and so I didn't find out about this until about a month after the fact, and I guess my son stood up, and basically what this teacher was telling him was that if you were black, you were less educated, you lived in poverty, and were more prone to violent behavior. What this has to do with teaching kids how to manage their behavior and their anger in an appropriate manner has nothing to do. I mean, it was beyond my comprehension. So anyway, it was my husband and I were visiting some friends, and it was my friend who said, you won't believe what Tristan did. That's my son. He stood up in class and he told this teacher that he felt that this class was culturally biased, and he was leaving. And this was in grade 7, and he walked out. And didn't come home and say anything to us. The school didn't phone us. You know, it wasn't until a month later that a friend of mine mentions this to me. And then my mother was staying with us at the time, and we'd been out for dinner at this friend's place. And Mom was ready to go down to the school now. Well, we can't go home, it's Saturday night, but we can go Monday morning. So anyway, we came down to the school, and we spoke with the area counselor. And it was funny because I worked in the school systems at the time, and he was a colleague. And so it was a bit of a difficult conversation to have with him. What he didn't get was, I kept saying, I don't understand why you're using American statistics to teach a class in Canada about, and particularly why you're using this example when you're teaching kids about anger management and inappropriate behaviors in terms of interpersonal skills. I don't understand, what the connection is here. And he told me, and I'll never forget this, he told me that he'd been teaching this class in the school district for a number of years, and at no time, in the Nanaimo school district, and at no time had anybody ever complained about this particular module. And I said, he told me that he had had Asian kids, South Asian kids, he'd had First Nations kids, and he had Caucasian kids in this class, and nobody has ever mentioned anything about this particular piece, and he's not changed the curriculum in all the time that he has taught this particular piece. And I said to him, so, have you ever had a black kid sit in the class while you're teaching this? And he said, no. And I said, well, when you talk about these statistics that have nothing to do with Canada, by the way, they're American statistics, you're not talking to him. That conversation isn't being reflected or isn't being directed at kids who are black. If I was First Nations, if I was Asian, or if I was white, it has nothing to do with me. But it does have something to do with my son. And he said, that my son had overreacted, and that he's the only person that in the class that had overreacted. And I said, well, you know what? I need you to know that my brother has 3 kids that attend this school as well. And my brother's wife is blonde and blue-eyed, and her kids, and their kids are blonde and blue-eyed. Half black, but blonde and blue-eyed. And I also need you to know that there are over 100 kids in this school, and that we only represent 3% of the population in Chase River. And at no time have we committed any crimes. We do not live in poverty, and we are educating our kids. And so I don't understand what this has to do with anger management. I said, I'm a child and youth care worker. I have worked with high-risk kids for a number of years, and I have never used someone's ethnicity to demonstrate a teachable moment in terms of interpersonal skills. So he then said that he apologized if he said, I apologize if I've offended you in any way. I said, you haven't offended me. You've offended my son, and that's who you need to apologize to. And I hope that you're able to do that. And then he said to me, I am not changing my curriculum because it's effective. And I said, okay, well, that's your prerogative. So then I wrote to the school district. And he did end up changing his curriculum. But the curriculum was changed for all the wrong reasons as far as I was concerned. I received a letter back from the school district telling me that because I had concerns and I raised the issue of color or that because a parent of a black child had complained about the curriculum, they were changing the curriculum. And for me, it wasn't about the color of anybody's skin. It was about using stereotyping. And it could have been a First Nations child, it could have been an Asian child, it could have been a Caucasian child. It just so happened that the statistics that he used were and the statistics that he used was just crazy. They were from Chicago, Green and Green, which is like an inner city project. What that has to do with rural James River was really anyway. But as I said, I mean, I've gone through periods in my life where I haven't felt that I belonged, and I think with my cousin doing this genealogy, it's been really helpful. I mean, I've discovered amazing things about my family. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is that I was a women's studies major, and so a lot of what I did while I was doing women's studies was examining my position and my standpoint in feminism, and where my beliefs around feminism derived from. And they derived from the women in my life. And so in doing that, I needed to really sort of delve into my family and listen to the stories that the women in my family tell. And my grandmother was one of the first women. They were called Women of the Well, and they were the first women of Congress, black women of Congress, or colored women of Congress, that met in Nova Scotia in 1917 to talk about the social conditions and the education and the economic conditions of blacks in Nova Scotia at that time. That was 1917, and that was pretty progressive. My grandmother also was one of the women that developed during the 30s, it was called the Colored Women's Benevolent Society. And you talked about church being a very much a part of your community. Church was very much the epicenter of my family's life. Not so much in that they were strident Christians, it's just that was a place where people came together, and that was a place of helping. And everybody knew everybody, and the whole philosophy of it takes a village to raise a child was very self-evident to that day in the same community.